Moya Koto, Talofalava, Bulavinaka. Good afternoon. It is a great pleasure for us to be here today, and thank you for this invitation. We would like to share with you some of the learnings from the Pacific Ocean Climate Assessment. That is a project supported by the New Zealand Ministry of Foreign Affairs and led by University of Canterbury, together with University of South Pacific in Fiji. So we are collaborating with about 90 scholars across the Pacific region, and this is what makes the project unique. We are trying to gather a series of learnings from the community on the climate impacts and how it affects people on the ground. And what we're trying to achieve is to look at reframing the narratives and the discourse around climate change taken from a Pacific standpoint. So the aim would be to gather a series of lessons from the community, but also try to combine them with the latest scientific evidence and Western science. So this is quite a novel project for the region. So we are working in 16 different countries. And one of the output would be to contribute also to the global stocktake as part of the UNFCCC process. Oh, we can discuss that probably later. I want to share the laugh with you. So there's some key concepts that we are exploring, and some of them are cultural innovation and collective empowerment, diversity, inclusion, equity, and justice. But all of them looked through the scope of the communities on the ground. So it is about redefining the climate crisis from Pacific standpoint and communities scope, really. So that's really the core of the project. So there's a few chapters as part of this assessment, and these chapters are divided by teams, and this will be also part of the final output. So we've got biodiversity, oceans, indigenous knowledge, we've got food security, climate mobility, cultural heritage, loss and damages. And I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of the current results from the climate mobility chapter that I'm part of. And this is a collaboration with some authors across the region. So the way we've looked at the assessment is to try and link community stories, identifying gaps and good practices in policy across the region, and trying to critically assess the concepts and narratives that are common in the emerging literature on climate change, but also trying to understand that in combination with the latest scientific evidence. So it's really a holistic approach that we're trying to undertake through that project. This is what we are trying to achieve for that specific chapter. So we are trying to look at the current narratives and framings on human mobility more specifically, and how we can reimagine human mobility from a Pacific standpoint. And so this is done by looking at the current research, IPCC definitions, and policy existing at the international, regional, and national level, but also exploring community stories and trying to identify the gaps that are common in research mostly, and trying to understand how it could be more relevant for the Pacific region. Some of the key findings are that there's some critical engagement with the conceptual framework around climate mobility, and especially there's some gaps around understandings around immobility and voluntary immobility. So attachment to land in the Pacific is really strong, and the focus on deficit narratives that are often regarded in terms of climate mobility are overshadowing the resilience mechanism that are successful in the Pacific and could actually teach us a lot. And some of the mechanisms around voluntary mobility are quite interesting to observe. And these are some of the learnings that we're trying to bring. But Dr. Vunibola will be telling you more about specific stories around immobility in the Pacific. And I just wanted to finish by saying that a really problematic narrative we identified is the narrative of climate victim. So this is really about understanding that the knowledge on climate change needs to be done through a collaboration of indigenous knowledge, a Western approach, because we can't afford to waste more time in being selective in the epistemic level. So, Dr. Vunibola will be telling you more about stories on the ground in the Pacific. Thank you.
Well, kia ora koutou katoa, warm greetings to everyone. How long do you have? Sorry.
Got 6 minutes.
6 minutes. Right. Try to. You've been good. Yeah. Get through these stories. So we are fortunate to present after James from the scientific from IPCC. What I'm trying to do is to tie up some of the realities on the ground from people who live by this catastrophe on a daily basis. So this case study has been conducted. So I'm talking from the case studies that I did. Dr. Gharbaoui also introduced. There are 90 of us throughout the region, and focusing especially on indigenous and Pacific scholars who are out in the region and exploring these stories as well, and how people are responding to climate crisis. I did 2 case studies in Fiji last year and back from Tonga in last 3 weeks. So this is Kia Island in Fiji, in Maduata, obliterated by the Category 5 cyclone Yasa 2.5 years ago. And it was also in the news in New Zealand, stating that it was like a war zone, as you've seen in the picture. Everything, trees, houses, boats, their source of livelihood, completely wiped out. And when this kind of catastrophe happen in these Pacific Island nations, when humans are reduced to the very basic, what remains is the connection to each other. We can say whatever, we can write whatever, but for them who live there, when these catastrophe like tsunami and Category 5 cyclone, when they are reduced at that very basic, it's the connection to people, the connection and knowledge of the environment around them. Because the first help to such communities may be 2 weeks, 3 weeks. What happened in between? So that's some of the stories that we are gathering, the story of resilience, connection to environment, solidarity, economy, and well-being. We also look at innovation and studying innovation under a critical indigenous lens. When you talk about innovation, the name of Elon Musk always come up, technology. And when we talk about indigenous innovation, we are talking about the collective, how we innovate to benefit the collective, rather than the Western mode of abstract reasoning of the economies, whereby individual gain from the modern economy. So there are 2 different kind of pictures. One is a fish trap, and this island community never used it. Being built by their ancestors many years ago, and nobody there know the exact time it was built. But the benefit, they realized the benefit of the fish trap after the cyclone, when all their boats are taken away by the cyclone and all the nets and fishing gears are gone. Then they realize after every high tide, they check the fish trap, there are some fish over there, usually the big fish, not the small ones. Whereas compared to the fishing net, from the big ones to the small ones, it takes everything. So the water system, they depended on a rotor tank, plastic tanks, and concrete tanks, which were also broken. And they have to resort to some of the innovative ways their ancestors been the built environment. So when we look at this, it's about how they have to keep on looking back at those very systems would have been there, but maybe they are not using it at the moment, but continue to look at it. 2 minutes, come on. Indigenous solidarity economies. James talked about climate finance. This is a community in Fiji, in Drawa, Vunibola, preserving a lot of most of their native forest, but the benefit from the money doesn't really correlate to the needs they have. And the big question is, shall we cut these forests and sell it off to support our wealth and our families, or to keep preserving it because they're not reaping the benefit that they or esteem to? So when we talk about indigenous resilience, mostly when the dominant narrative is that when you have money, you're resilient. But for these communities, is the other way around. And most of the literature focus on resilience as a post hoc kind of initiative. Okay, after a cyclone or any climate catastrophe, now CSO, civil societies, foreign aid come in and build tents. That's resilient. But even now, people are living in tents after 2 years because they are not able to build modern houses. It's so expensive, they don't have the materials. So how do they define resilience is typically so different from how modern narratives define resilience. Tongan case study, I go through, been facing this island, Atata Island, been facing a lot of sea level rises compounded by the recent tsunami. And they have to be moved by the government to leave the island and now living on Atata Isi, which is on that side. So when they are moved, they have the piece of land to build a house, but they don't have a place to plant. So on the island, they have the sea to get the food, as well as plant the food on the land. But over here, no. But the connection to the land is pretty strong, so they have to keep traveling back to the island every now and then. They are allowed by the government and the state to live on the island for 1 day. So the definition of mobility, yes, we moved, but we still have to go back to support our livelihood, and our connection is still strong. So those are some of the narratives coming from these communities, as well as people are facing hardship to grow crops. The intensity of the sun keep on increasing, and even the women are struggling with weaving as the economy, because the pendanus are struggling to grow, and so forth. So for us, based on the IPCC 2022, we need to include indigenous knowledge into how we go forward with this, but the question is, how do we use it? What kind of knowledge do we do? So part of our project is to look at this and how indigenous knowledge from the stories from the communities can be implemented to impact policy, as well as practical implications. Thank you.